The manager reached over the young clerk's shoulder, canceled the transaction with 2 hard keystrokes, and slid the bottle of heart medication back across the counter toward the 81-year-old woman it belonged to. "I'm sorry," he said, in the flat voice of a man who was not sorry. "We don't apply that discount here. Full price or nothing." The woman's hands were shaking. The price on the little screen had quadrupled since the last refill, and she had counted out what she had on the way over, in the car, twice. And it was not enough. And now there were people behind her in line, and a manager standing over a girl half his age, and a bottle of pills she had taken every single day for 11 years, sitting between them like an accusation. The young clerk, her name tag said Kayla, had already found the way to fix it. The manufacturer coupon, the store's own hardship discount. And when that still left the woman $40 short, Kayla had quietly slid 2 20s out of her own pocket and onto the counter, the way you do for your own grandmother. No fuss, no speech. That was the thing the manager canceled. "That hardship code is not for you to decide," he said to Kayla. "Loud enough now. Loud enough for the line. And employees do not put their own money in the register. That's a violation. Do you understand me?" He pulled a folded paper from his shirt pocket and held it up like evidence. "This has already been sent to corporate. Your insubordination, the unauthorized discounts, all of it. It's documented. So I'd think very carefully about your next move, because as of right now, this is out of my hands." Kayla's eyes filled. The old woman started to gather her purse to leave with nothing. And back in the line, a man in a worn ball cap and a gray jacket, who had been quietly watching the whole thing, took his phone out of his pocket. He was not filming. He was looking up a number, because the manager was right about one thing. It had been sent to corporate. But it was about to be sent again, by someone else, from a very different point of view, and that man would have the entire thing in motion before he even reached his truck in the parking lot. There is a Brightway pharmacy in a strip mall in Reseda, between a nail salon and a place that cashes checks, and it is the kind of place where the whole country quietly takes its medicine. Fluorescent light that makes everyone look tired. Linoleum the color of nothing. Aisles of the small necessities of being a body. The bandages, the reading glasses, the heating pads, the pills that keep the old hearts going. It is not a glamorous place, and it does not pretend to be. But for a lot of people, especially the old ones, the pharmacy counter is one of the last places a stranger looks them in the eye and asks how they're doing, and means it. And there are clerks behind those counters who understand that the job is half medicine and half mercy. Kayla Reyes was one of them. She was 22, a pharmacy technician working the counter at Brightway while she put herself through nursing school at the community college and helped her mother make rent on the side. She was tired all the time. She was also, by every account of the regulars who came through her line, the reason a lot of them came through her line. She remembered their names, and their grandkids' names, and which ones lived alone, and she treated the 80-year-olds in front of her like people who had once been young and important and still were. The 81-year-old woman at her counter that afternoon was named Pearl. She had been coming to that Brightway for 19 years, since before it was a Brightway, and she had buried her husband Hank out of it. In a manner of speaking, it was the pharmacy that filled the prescriptions of his last bad year. She lived on a fixed income that had not moved in a decade, while everything around it had. And the medication that kept her own heart in rhythm had, between one refill and the next, jumped to a number she simply did not have. She had not made a scene about it. People like Pearl do not make scenes. She had just gone quiet and started to put the bottle back, and that quiet was the thing that had made Kayla reach into her own pocket. The man in the ball cap, 3 back in the line, had watched a young woman pay $40 she clearly did not have to spare, so that an old woman she was not related to could keep her heart beating. And then he had watched her manager punish her for it. The manager's name was Dale Furman, and to understand why he did what he did, you have to understand that the Brightway in Reseda was the only kingdom he had ever been given. He was 49. He had been a store manager for 19 years, at that location for 11 of them, and in all that time he had applied for the district manager position 11 separate times, and 11 separate times corporate had given it to someone else, someone younger, someone they called leadership track, someone more than once that Dale himself had trained. He had sat in 11 interviews in 11 borrowed ties and answered the same questions and watched the same polite faces decide. Again, that he was a man who ran a store, but was not a man who went anywhere. So Dale Furman had made the rules his entire personality, because the rules were the only authority he had left. If you have 19 years and no promotion and a lanyard of keys to a building you do not own, the one thing you can still control is whether the hardship discount gets used, whether the codes get entered correctly, whether the metrics that corporate grades you on stay clean. The rulebook was not a tool to Dale. It was a fortress. Because if the rules did not matter, if a girl could just decide to be kind and override them whenever her heart told her to, then 19 years of Dale enforcing them did not matter. And then Dale did not matter, and that was a thing he could not afford to let be true. And Kayla Reyes threatened all of it without even trying. She was 22, and the customers loved her, and she was on her way to being a nurse, on her way out, on her way to exactly the kind of life that kept stepping over Dale on the promotion ladder. Her easy kindness was to him a daily referendum on the only thing he had. Every time she bent a rule to help someone, and the customer beamed at her, Dale felt the floor of his small kingdom shift. So when he caught her with her own $40 on the counter and the hardship code on the screen, something in him that had been waiting 11 years finally had its moment. He did not just stop it. He documented it. He sent it up the chain. The same chain that had stepped over him 11 times. Because reporting Kayla was the one occasion he could imagine where corporate might finally take Dale Furman's side. He had no idea that the chain was about to take a very different call. "It's all right, sweetheart," Pearl said to Kayla, which was the worst part, because Pearl was the one being denied her medicine and she was comforting the girl. "You shouldn't have used your own money. You'll get yourself in trouble." She had her purse on her arm. She was leaving. That was when the man in the ball cap stepped up out of the line. He did not raise his voice. He did not look at Dale at all, at first. He looked at Pearl, and he said, "Gently, ma'am. Would you let me take care of that? It would be my privilege." And before Dale could open his mouth, the man had a card on the counter and was nodding at Kayla. "Whatever the full price is," and put her 2 20s back in her own pocket where they belong. "Sir," Dale's voice went tight. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to wait your turn. There's a process here. And there's a woman who needs her heart medication," the man said. Still quiet, still not unkind. "I think the process can survive me paying for it." He looked at Dale then, finally, for the first time, and he asked one question. The way you ask a question you actually want the answer to. That paper in your pocket. The one you sent to corporate. He paused. "Does it have the part where she paid out of her own pocket for an old woman she didn't know? Or did you only write down the rules she broke?" Dale Furman opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The man paid the full price for Pearl's medication. He helped her get the bottle into her purse. He said something to Kayla that nobody else could hear, and whatever it was, it made the girl press her lips together and nod and look at the floor. Then he tipped the brim of his cap at Pearl, told her he hoped she'd take it easy that evening, and walked out the automatic doors into the parking lot. Dale exhaled. He thought it was over. He thought the strange man in the cap was gone, and that the documentation in his pocket was still the last word, and that the order of his small kingdom had survived. He was wrong about all of it. In the parking lot, the man in the cap did not get in his truck and drive away. He sat on the tailgate, and he took out his phone, and he made the call he had been looking up the number for since he was third in line. It went, eventually, after he gave his name twice, and a startled assistant put him through, to a senior person in Brightway's corporate office. A real one. The kind whose calls Dale Furman had spent 19 years hoping to receive. And the man on the tailgate told them, calmly and in order, exactly what he had just watched. A clerk named Kayla Reyes, who had used a legitimate hardship discount, and then quietly covered the rest from her own pocket for an 81-year-old woman who could not afford her heart medication. A store manager named Dale Furman who had canceled it, humiliated both of them in front of a full line, and announced that he had already reported the clerk to corporate for the offense of being kind. "You're going to get a report on your desk," the man said. "Maybe it's already there. It's going to say a clerk committed several policy violations. I'm calling so that when you read it, you know what those violations actually were." He let that sit. "I'm not asking you to destroy anybody. I want to be clear about that. The manager isn't a monster. He's a guy who's been guarding a rulebook for 19 years, because somewhere along the line, it became the only thing that made him feel like he mattered. And you'd know more than I would about why a man ends up like that after 19 years at the same company." A pause. "But that young woman did the single most decent thing I've seen anybody do all month, and she should not lose her job over it. That's the whole reason I'm calling. Before I'd even left the parking lot, because by tomorrow the paperwork would have been the only version of it that existed, and the paperwork was a lie." He gave them Pearl's situation in case there was a program that could help her with the next refill and the one after that. Then he gave them his number and hung up, and the thing was already in motion. It moved fast, the way these things move when the right person makes the right call at the right moment. Within the hour, before Dale's shift had even ended, the district office was on the line to the Reseda store. Within the hour, 2 other customers who had been in that line had already posted what they'd seen. And a retired school teacher who'd been right behind Pearl had written it all down in detail with the time stamped. And the version of events in Dale Furman's pocket, the official one, the documented one, the one that was supposed to be the last word, had stopped being the only story in the world. Dale took the call from the district in the cramped back office, and whatever he had spent 11 years hoping that office would finally say to him, it was not this. The man in the cap had not gone far. He had been about to ride off when something turned him around, and he came back into the store, past the line that had thinned out, and he found Dale Furman alone in the manager's office. A windowless room the size of a closet, a desk buried in binders, a corkboard of policies going yellow at the corners. Dale was sitting very still, the phone still in his hand, staring at the binders like a man looking at the only thing he'd ever built and seeing it for what it was. The man knocked on the open door. Then he came in, moved a box off the spare chair, and sat down. "I didn't make that call to ruin you," he said. "I want you to hear that. I made it for her." Dale laughed, a short, wet sound. "You're him, aren't you? The cap." He shook his head. He couldn't finish it. 19 years. 11 times I put in for district. 11 times they gave it to some kid I trained. His voice cracked on it. And the one time I send something up that chain, the one time I think they're finally going to back me. He pressed the heel of his hand against his eyes. It's you on the other end of it. Of course it is. Keanu listened. He did not interrupt. He did not rush in. You want to know what I actually saw out there? He said, after a while. I didn't see a man who hates kind people. I saw a man who's been told 11 times that he doesn't count, and decided the rule book was the last thing that did. So, when somebody broke a rule to be kind, it didn't read to you as kindness. It read as one more person telling you that the thing you've given your life to doesn't matter. He leaned forward. I felt small in rooms before, Dale. Everybody has. And the thing nobody tells you is that the smaller you feel, the harder you guard whatever little patch of ground you've got, and the harder you guard it, the smaller it gets. You've been making your own kingdom smaller for 19 years. Dale was crying now, the quiet way of a man who hasn't in a long time. That girl out there, Keanu said. Kayla, she did in 4 seconds the thing you've spent 19 years too scared to do. She made somebody feel like they counted. And you tried to fire her for it. He let it land, gently. What if the thing that finally got you noticed by corporate wasn't a rule you enforced? What if it was the day you decided to be the manager who let a kid like that fly? Dale closed his eyes. The script gives that a full breath. I'm not asking you to quit, or to grovel, Keanu said, standing. I'm asking you to walk back out there and be the boss that girl deserves. Start by telling her you were wrong, in front of the same people who watched you tell her she was. The kingdom gets bigger the second you do it. I promise you that. Then, he left. Dale Furman walked out of that office a different shape than he'd gone in. He went to Kayla first. She was at the end of the counter, red-eyed, bracing for the end of the only income that kept her in school. And Dale Furman, in front of the thinning line and the cashiers and the retired schoolteacher who was still lingering, did the thing he had been too frightened to do for 19 years. I was wrong, he said, out loud, where I was wrong out loud before. You used a discount you were allowed to use, and then you spent your own money to keep an old woman's heart beating. And I called that a violation because, he stopped, and made himself say the true part. Because I've forgotten how to do what you just did, and watching you do it made me feel like nothing. That's mine, not yours. I'm sorry, Kayla. I'm withdrawing every word of that report. I'm going to write a different one. Kayla Reyes put her hand over her mouth. Keanu was at the door by then, on his way back out for good. He smiled, not the careful one, the real one, slow and crooked and unhurried, and he said it just loud enough for Dale to hear. That's all I needed to hear. The retired schoolteacher started clapping, and a couple of the other customers joined in, an unlikely little sound under the fluorescent lights of a strip mall pharmacy. Kayla wiped her face and laughed. And Keanu slipped out the automatic doors and was on his bike and gone before anyone could fumble out a phone. Off to wherever he'd actually been headed before he got in line behind an old woman and her heart medication. It did not all heal in an afternoon. These things never do. Kayla kept her job, of course. The new report Dale wrote saw to that. And so did the district office, which had its own opinions now about what had happened. She finished nursing school 2 years later. At her pinning ceremony, there was a card with no name on it and enough inside to cover the last of her tuition. And she never did find out for certain who it was from, though she had a guess, and she cried about it in the car. She works the cardiac floor at a hospital in the valley now. The old ones on that floor say there's a nurse who remembers all their names. Pearl got her medication that month, and the next, because Brightway's corporate office, embarrassed, and to their credit, moved. Actually built a real hardship program out of the mess, a standing fund any clerk could draw on for exactly the situation Kayla had reached into her own pocket for. They did not name it after anyone, because the man who'd called had asked that his name stay out of it entirely. But the internal memo that announced it described the incident that prompted it. And for a while, quietly, the clerks who knew called it the Pearl Rule. And Dale Furman. Dale is the part of this that surprises people. He did not get fired. He did not get his district promotion either. That ship had sailed years before, and he came slowly to understand that it always would have. But something in him had broken loose in that closet of an office, and he turned out to be, of all things, a good manager once he stopped being a frightened one. He let his clerks use the Pearl Fund freely. He learned the regulars' names, the way Kayla had. 2 of the young people he trained after that went on to district jobs, and Dale wrote their recommendations himself, and meant them, and discovered that being the man who helped someone fly felt nothing at all like being stepped over. It felt like the opposite. He retired from that same Reseda store at 63, and the party they threw him was real and crowded, and a little old woman named Pearl came, on the arm of a nurse named Kayla, and the 3 of them sat together and did not talk about the worst afternoon any of them had ever shared, because they had all, in their own way, been let out of it. I've told a lot of stories on this channel. I keep coming back to this one. I think it's the word corporate that does it. The way cruelty, when it's small and scared, almost never calls itself cruelty. It calls itself policy, procedure, the rules, documentation. This has already been sent to corporate. It hides inside the language of just following the process. And the terrible thing is that the people who hide their hardest are usually the ones who've been made to feel smallest. The ones who've been stepped over so many times that a rule book becomes the only ground they're allowed to stand on. It is very hard to hate a man like that once you understand him. It is just as hard to let him keep hurting people. I don't know that I'd have made the call. I'd like to think I'd have looked up the number from the back of the line instead of just shaking my head and driving off the way I usually do. But honestly, I'm not sure. Most of us aren't sure. And maybe that's the thing worth carrying out of here, that the paperwork is almost never the whole story, that somebody has to be willing to tell the other version, and that it's usually the quiet person 3 back in the line who has to decide whether to be the one who does. This story is fictional, inspired by Keanu Reeves' well-known habit of quietly standing up for ordinary people. The pharmacy, the clerk, the manager, and the old woman are invented. The kind of cruelty that calls itself policy, though, I suspect you've stood in a line behind it. If this one reached you, drop a comment and tell me about a time someone hid behind the rules to be unkind, or a time someone broke one to be kind to you. Share it with somebody who needs the reminder that the paperwork isn't the whole story. If you want more stories like this, subscribe, and I'll keep telling them. See you in the next one.